Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Butt, and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 193 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Okay, turn this fan. Sometimes it makes too much noise. As I'm working to develop the groin abdomen area and to develop this to get all of it to agree, to match, because we indexed this onto, we merged two models and we're marrying them on the job. I'm sinking lower portions here to create different volume, okay? And part of that, let's see if this works. Part of that is pushing depth here around her waistband, okay, to sink that so that I've got the right dimension or the right contours to go from where her waist is up towards her knee, okay? Same time I'm doing that, I'm pushing this in. Now, what I did before, we mentioned in the last video, by taking away volume here on the side, where she was out, it was down to here, it was out to here, all down to here, and then this was a lot wider. As I push that in, I push this in, that helps make this look taller, okay? And this goes back to, you know, when I was talking about you can't dig yourself out of a hole, you have to lift it by moving everything around it down and back. So that's what I'm doing here, to get some bulge here to make this look more like it's coming forward, like it's forward. The hand is oversized right now. I mean, it's as big as my hand. And we still got to go back just a little bit. As I narrow the hand, let's move this up just a little bit. As this narrows, because I got a point here, with my crooked pencil. Don't step on your pencil, okay? It'll last longer. As I have a point here, I have a point here, a couple here beside her hand that I shot, you know, a quarter inch or so below her hand. So I had room to shift her hand a little bit. Now these points here are on top of the knuckle. And so because they're on top of the knuckle, you could shift it over a little bit and go from being a high spot to being a low spot. So it could be between the fingers, and you could potentially pick up a little bit of volume here and here. And that's a, I don't want to say it's a trick, but that's a technique we use pretty regularly. You know, you put it together, and then if you have to shift a little bit to get a better view, you can. But as I shrink her hand and narrow it, it's going to make it pop out further. It's going to come out more from the chest. And then I'll be able to use this height, which should be close to where the wrist is. And this lower wrist will be higher than her upper wrist. This should be the high area right here, where her wrist is. And then there'll be a little bit of her arm. As I develop this, I have to be careful not to cut away what could be her wrist, her arm, her forearm, okay? Because you're going to have radius, I'll know which one it is. You have this lower bone, and you got to have that there so we can have a direct signal. This will go back, this cuff, because this is full round, has to be approximately open, approximately the width of what her wrist would be, okay? So this has to have a lot more volume, and we'll pick that up in here because this point that we shot for this nipple, remember, was fairly high on the model there, and it's not, you know, it's high on this job too. It's not, it should work pretty well. But we've got that, and we've got enough room here to point that hand very accurately. You may do more of that, but I'm going to rush some of this stone off to get it close so it shoots faster. I still have my small points that I haven't stripped off yet. But we've got to make sure before we went nuts and pointed that whole hand, really have to put this forearm together. And so we've got to have a couple of falls here if we do it like the model, and I've got a little low spot right there that I got to pick up. So we'll have to work with this, probably sink this a little bit, and take this top off, and that should make this forearm look pretty well. Because that's really the concern, because this is the angle we want, but it also has to sink back to where, if this is her wrist, just say for instance that's where her wrist is, her arm has to pivot so that it's straight out to that arm. You can't have the arm come out here and then have a big old rubbery looking wonky elbow, okay? And because this is on that model, we're not going to swing it up with the compasses. We're going to make it match the index model. So this has to be done by, so I'm just going to keep working on it to bring these all together at the same time. Once they're together at the same time, then I can do more with the blouse with the top, the top portion of the drape. So I'm going to work on this and try to make this look good. We'll get the top of her hand cleaned off right there. And this is where the thumb is. All of this has to come off. So I'm going to do that. Back to work. Okay, now for something totally different. This is about being right, and I want to point out something that I've said wrong and believed wrong for 25 years plus. When I was being trained, these are what we call a bush axe or a hand axe. Now, I don't have a regular hand axe, okay? Regular hand axe, you see them sometimes like on eBay and that, and they just come and they look like an axe. They just have a single head that's sharpened on, usually on both sides, and it's for striking stone. Now, I always was under the impression they were more designed for working soft stone, not for granite, not for hard stone. And then these are what we call a bush hammer or a bush axe, and that's what I was taught. And I think this one says, yeah, they don't have that on it. But these were for hand axing or finishing a stone. And I was taught, and I wasn't really trained because these are a novelty at this point in the game. Nobody used them anymore. You can use them, they still work just the same, but in the time it takes for this to hit 100 times versus the time it takes this to hit 100 times, people aren't paying you to do this anymore. So this is just for demonstration stuff nowadays. But I was always taught that this was something that you operated by dropping. You didn't swing it because you break the blades, okay? And that it was common for, like my grandfather's tool chest, he's got several of these in his chest. He's a finisher, okay? And because you didn't swing them hard, you didn't need a robust handle. They would just take a piece of slat lumber that, off a crate or something like that, just to slip through the hole, and then you would spend your time dropping it and letting the weight of the tool do the finishing work and that's how you got a fine finish. And then you could have, like my grandfather's tool chest isn't very big, and then you would take and you just wrap the handle and it'd pop out, and you'd have a few of these in your tool chest in one handle. Okay, you didn't have a bunch of them hung like I've got a little fancy rack over here on the side with a bunch of these. Well, watching videos on the computer, and there's, I'll put a link in the description. You can see these are out of England back in the 60s, and they're, I don't know, they call them heritage films or whatever, but they're, they got a bunch of old masters, at that point, old men, men older than me, or not. And there's a granite quarry video where they're just pulling stone and they don't really show much for any tooling or work, hand work. But then there's one that I'll link in the video that a friend sent me, said, hey Clint, have you seen this? Where they're cutting millstones, and you want to know what kind of stone they're using. It says in the beginning it's a basalt quarry. But, you know, when they were hitting it, I could tell, I said, that sounds like basalt to me, because when you hit stones that size, you understand how they sound. And basalt has a different tone, a little sharper ring than granite tends to have. So anyways, they're doing this stone and they're busting it all off with big and small axes and no pneumatic tools. They're just doing it all by hand. 1966, old men just think all day long. You know, and really cool stuff. Well, they get down to the end, okay, and they don't use plumb blocks like I showed you to set pads and measure down. They cut a flat strip that receives a board that's flat enough for what they need, straight enough for what they need, and then they just cut another strip until all those work. And they mark a rudimentary line around the edge so they know where they're going, so they don't have them skewed, but then they can reduce the areas between them. You know, much like what I do, just with power tools, but a little different approach. Then they get to the finishing work. Well, after they get done with the hand axes, just flogging away on them, and it's funny because they hit and they let the tool collapse. They don't strike deep. And you'll learn by watching people that know what they're doing. They're not doing that as an accident. That's done on purpose. And I bet the reason that they hit and let it collapse is that has a lot to do with how much energy goes into the cut, into the stone, versus how much energy is tipped away. Just like me throttling an air hammer, you know, and turning the air down a little bit on the hand machine, I can hit easy. If you hit and let the tool flop over, you're losing a lot of this inertia, this energy, you're letting it go by. And so that's probably very deliberate. But then they reach over, they have a couple of great big old hand axes, and they're two-handed going to town, just wailing on that stone with those hand axes, you know, these bush hammers like this. And they were at least this big, if not bigger. And I'm gonna try to put some pictures in here. I took some screenshots of it, just so, you know, if you're too lazy to watch the video. But these can actually be swung, and it looks like they even had bigger ones that they were swinging, because I don't know, scale-wise, they're pretty close to what, you know, looking at the video. But they had longer handles. They had handles that were 2/3 the length of a sledgehammer, of a big hammer, and they were going to town. So that's what they actually did. Okay, so I was wrong. I was not ever told that you swing one of these like that, and I've never met anybody that told me that's how they were used in the first place, because very few people know what this is, know what it's for, or know how to use one. And I had always kind of been in awe of thinking that these guys are taking this hammer with a head that was several pounds, and they were pinching it all day long to lift it and drop it. Because I was thinking, man, they're going to have grip strength, they're going to have forearms that make mine look like little puppies. And everybody says your forearms are ridiculous, Button. So I was pretty impressed. Really, really, really fantastic to see that. And so you just, you know, I'll be honest, I was washing the dishes after breakfast, and I had a thing going because we're supposed to down here cut stone, and they're going don't, and I'm listening to these two men stay in rhythm, because that rhythm motivates you. Bump, 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 bump. I know what I'm supposed to hit because it's alternating. And when one of them got off tack, da-dum, 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 dum, 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 and then they'd pace themselves to go back to get into an equal rhythm. But it was really cool when they got to the end of the basic surfacing, and they were scribing. I didn't see the bush hammers. They were scribing it, marking it with a compass. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, how'd they get that stone that smooth? I didn't see that. And so I backed it up, whipping out the bush hand, okay? So, there's always room to learn, okay? I've been talking about these for years like I knew because of what I was taught and trained, and I just got educated, all right? So keep your mind open, all right, and learn, be willing to learn, okay, because you never know when it's going to pop up. I'd watched that video a couple of times, just sort of, have it on, didn't pay attention. I finally was watching it more intently, and I noticed that, and it's worth watching these videos, all right? Now let's go back to pneumatic tools and this easy way of doing it with all the modern stuff. And I'll put my bush axes, hand axes back, all right? Back to work. Before I get to it, I wanted to show, I did a video yesterday and I had too much wind noise from the fan, so I threw that clip away. But I wanted to, I joke about I need a bigger studio because I can't back up far enough. I hope you can see she's really starting to come together. There's a lot more going on than what there was before. And a lot of it has to do with the depth and the definition I've got over here. I need to finish this, but I can't really get at here because my this bench is in the way. It's not worth moving. I'll just leave that for now. But I've got this side pretty well defined. Took a little more off under her arm. Her upper arm is going to tip here. And then this has to go back at least another ½ an inch. And so that's going to pick up a lot of volume as this arm sort of cups this breast as it would in real life. And her hand, her arm looks pretty good. It doesn't look too rubber. We've got to take more off the top because this is the tip of the thumb as the thumb sits here. And so this is an accurate point. You see that right there, and then the tip of her thumb. So there's still a lot of material to come off, and this hand will migrate down a little bit and will shrink. And as that shrinks, it will make this look bigger. I wouldn't mind if I had more material out here, but that's the way I've shot it, so I've got to work with it. Time I go back, sink it here, I'll pick up thickness there. That'll look really good. And once we tune this up, that will help this look more voluminous. Now these points that I shot are here and here and here on high points, okay? What's easy to do is to leave those as a low point and move them just a tiny bit, move that detail to like up here, and then that's where it fades and that saves me some volume. And so that's one way to manage that, but we got to work that hand in. I think I'm pretty good with that hip. The leg, especially the lower leg, I got to tweak it just a little bit to try to keep it look like this part here isn't kicked out as much. I want to move that in just a little bit to help straighten that leg, and I think it'll look better. But because she's a little knock-kneed the way she is. But I think it's coming pretty well. And I think we got a lot. I got to take some more off that shoulder. You can see up here on the top where I marked it red, as I'll narrow that shoulder in and round that over as it goes back. And we should, coming really good. Okay. Turn the fan on and get the carving. It's hot today. As you're working, especially after you've taken a break, in the morning, coming in, after lunch, coming in, whatever. If you can't, especially if this is mainly if you're direct carving, if you don't see it, like, you should be able to look at it and see what you got to carve and what's heavy and what's not. Anytime you're working and you've got any kind of brain fog, okay, scrape something, hack something, get the point machine out and point, because you don't have to You don't have to actively think beyond a straightforward operation, okay? Trying to do some work on her, working on this sleeve, starting to develop these folds, and working here, and I'll work this back, and that will bring this forward. And as I'm doing that, I've got to really think about it. This is big and weird here, but I don't want to take it off because I don't want to surrender volume. I want her arm to have the volume. And then on my model, it cups under her arm and it's biggest out here by the elbow. So right here, this is fine. So if I work in this, but I don't have any extra stone to play with. So if I've got any kind of brain fog, I need to just point, okay? I've taken some material off her leg. You'll learn how her leg could be more over this way. But if I carve it, her leg would be over this. You'll learn how to position her leg, not just by the material on one side or the other, but on the material more to the back. Because if you can see, like where this cups around, and I know I'm in the shadow, but if you can see where that cups around, you cut that extra material off the back, and it's going to help that leg visually move one way or the other because you undercut it. And so I can work that and say, oh yeah, that looks a lot better, and then leave it alone. Leave it rough. I don't have to finish it right now. Then when I've got some fog, or when I'm tired, or when I'm coming in and starting off, I can just settle right in and axe that and get settled in, get warmed up, athlete kind of mentality or whatever, but get the tools all comfortable, get everything going, and then I can go and do serious work. So recognize if you need to change what you're working on so you don't ruin something by obsessing on it when you shouldn't. Because a lot of people will do that and just instinctively take down volume here that looks weird instead of saying, that could be a fantastic fold, it'll make that arm look big, I'm just going to leave it right there, I'm going to work the rest of this and bring this all together at once as I complete the shoulder and the chest and everything, and make it look really good. So, and honestly, the next thing I'll probably point is I'll probably work on pointing the upper side of her hand and put that together really accurately from the model and see it's right where I want it to be. That's ideally it will be, but that gives me, I can know exactly where I want that hand to be and make that hand look fantastic, and then understand that this lack of volume will be addressed as I address this heavy material behind it, and I cut folds and whatever in her fabric, and I like to do the fabric so it looks like there's some overhang, okay, so that it looks like it's pushing down, like you're pressing it, not just that your arm is just levitating right on the surface and not compressing the fold. Because if I put my hand on my chest, the folds lose, okay? They don't just magically stay perfect and they're all propped up and my arm's out. And that goes back to what I mentioned before, is that a carver may carve the surface, but a sculptor carves the actual form, the shape that creates the surface. And so by representing that more accurately, it can look a little more intimate, like that hand actually is doing something, as opposed to just having this puffy look where it looks fake. Okay? If it doesn't make sense, go to the cemetery, look for stone. This is what I mean. Okay? So, still working it back. Get a little more on top of the hand. I don't know if I can get in that fan and ruin the audio. Get a little more under the arm. And as I push the waist back, that hand will continue to come forward. So probably gonna wrap this video up for now, but I think the next video, I'm gonna start working more along the top of the hand. I'm gonna point from the model pretty hard to the top of the hand around the neckline to open that up some. make sure the hand's where I want it. And then while the hand still has some extra mass on it, I think I'm going to go ahead and work back to not to point the whole face, but to work back to where it looks like it should be in terms of the body and the model and everything, and make sure I'm happy with where it's at, and to leave room for adjustment if I need to before I commit too much with this chest, and make sure that that's all going to coordinate well with the head, because I can point all of this, but I'm still at the stage where I'm trying to marry the top to the bottom, and I want this all to look like to look like she's normal and not like she's hunchback or some weird deformity. I want her to look pretty good, because this is still a little bit forward. I stayed up with a lot of my points, so I've got to go back a little bit more, and that coordinates with this as well. I just want to make sure that she's not too far back or too far forward. I want a very pleasing posture. So I think I'm going to wrap this up for now. Let's see, my name is Clinton Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.